So, dear colleagues, a very good afternoon. Welcome back to our conference. Our conference of today is the fourth of a series of conferences hosted by the Research Center for Private Law of the University of Lisbon, which have taken place over the past year. The first one concerning online dispute resolution, the second one on autonomous systems and the law, the third legal challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, the European Union's digital services package, and finally we have Fintech regulation and the licensing principle. I have been in charge of organizing or co-organizing these conferences, and I could not have done that without the support and the help of exceptional colleagues that helped me setting up these programs. In the case of this conference, I would like to mention specifically my dear colleagues Diogo Pereira Duarte and Catarina Granadeiro, who have done a terrific job not only in helping select the speakers, but in setting up all the logistics of this event, which we hope will be an event that is useful in order to enlighten all those interested on this very timely topic. Now we have a set of very distinguished speakers in our next panel, which will concern the market in crypto assets. And our first speaker of today is, I think, the only non-lawyer among our speakers, Keir Finlow-Bates. Keir has a degree in mathematics and information engineering from Cambridge University and a PhD in mathematics and education from London South Bank University. Keir has been a blockchain researcher. He's also a well-known inventor, has over 40 granted patents, and is the author of a very well-known book on blockchain entitled More Over Brokers, Here Comes Blockchain. I think he has it with him, so maybe he can show it to all of you. You can order it online, and I think it will be a worthy purchase in order to learn about blockchain. But you can also learn from Keir with his videos that are available notably on YouTube, and which are very enlightening on some certain subjects which for us lawyers sometimes are difficult to grasp. So Keir will be speaking on blockchain disintermediation and reintermediation. And Keir, thank you very much for being with us today. We hope that you enjoy your stay in Lisbon as much as we will enjoy listening to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. The last time I was in Lisbon was in 1995, so it's been quite a while. I was given this title, Blockchain Disintermediation and Reintermediation, which is understandable because we're here at a university. If I had come up with the title myself, I would have put it as How Blockchain Removes Middlemen and How They Get Back In Again. As I was introduced, I'm Keir Finlow-Bates. I've been looking at blockchain for about 12 years now, full-time for the last 7, so we can skip on from that one quickly. And I think it's worth talking a bit about why I study blockchain. Now, I got involved in it because it involves computer networks, it involves programming, it involves mathematics and cryptography, and they're all things I'm really, really interested in. And if you present blockchain to a technical person purely from those perspectives, they're going to tell you, why use this? It's a really slow, clumsy, expensive database. Use a database instead. But the thing is that blockchain isn't solving a technical problem, it's solving a social problem. And in fact, if you add to that list, blockchain also requires you to look at economics, psychology and sociology, even the law, and philosophy. So it's really, really wide. It encompasses a whole large area of topics. The ones further down the list I'm not so familiar on. I know a bit about patent law, and that's about it. And I'm a bit of an armchair philosopher, but really it's the technical side of things that I look at the most. But it's got to be grounded. You have to understand what the purpose of this technology is for, and it's not just for computer scientists to have fun. So let's look at the second word in the title then, disintermediation. And that simply boils down to allowing parties to transact with each other without requiring an intermediary. And in blockchain, it's actually an emergent property. There's no line of code that you can point at and say, there's the function that makes blockchain a disintermediating technology. It's a whole combination of different aspects that cause it to have that property. And from my perspective, it's not actually even the most important one, and I'll come back to why in a bit. So we'll do the usual, what is a blockchain? And when you ask a technical person, they'll start spouting stuff about peer-to-peer networks and digital signing algorithms and stuff like that. But really, what it boils down to is it creates a ledger that is censorship resistant and allows two people to change entries in that ledger that amount to a transaction. And it's a bit of a problem when you talk to people, because people think of transactions as things moving from one person to another. When you're using a ledger, of course, what you're doing is you're changing a number in one row and changing a corresponding number in another row, and there's not actually anything going between those two people at all. And that's the reason why in the past you've had to have a central authority, because they need to make sure that those changes to that ledger are being made properly. And it's that need that blockchain removes. And as a result, the parties can transact without having to trust each other. And when I say that, some people will say, well, I read some article somewhere that said that blockchain is trust building. And you're saying that there is no trust there. There's no need for trust. And again, this boils down to the fact that there are a couple of different kinds of trust. There's psychological trust, and that's, for example, I trust my best friend enough to lend him my car because I know it'll come back in as good a condition as I lent it to him. I don't have anything that allows me to prove that other than a feeling that I've built up over time. I don't trust him enough to lend him money because he likes to spend it on things, but I'll lend him my car. On the flip side, you have something more like deterministic trust. I trust that tomorrow the sun will rise, or that if I let go of an apple, it's going to fall to the ground. And that's a completely different kind of trust, because it's you believing that a formal system, a deterministic system, will do something every time. And that's the kind of trust that blockchain brings to the table. It's not the psychological kind, it's this, everything is automated, everything is formal, you can work out what's going to happen next, and that's why you trust it. So I said earlier that I didn't think disintermediation is the most important thing. The thing that I do think is most important is this idea of censorship resistance. On a blockchain, you own your assets, and that means that you can transact with them when you want to. If you look at our current financial system, you may own your assets, but you don't possess them anymore. You've given them over to a bank. And we do this for a good reason, because nobody wants to keep a suitcase full of 50-euro notes under their bed. But there are some downsides to this, and I can give you an example. I was on holiday in Hurghada in Egypt a couple of years ago, and I put my debit card in an ATM, and I couldn't take any money out. And the bank was doing this to protect me. It had decided that I should be in Finland, not in Egypt, therefore I can't have my money, because it's obviously not me trying to withdraw it. But it's those kind of incidents that make you discover that you don't own your possessions anymore. And there's a darker side to this as well. There are cases in the US where people were going to make perfectly legitimate purchases with their money using the debit card that a bank had issued them, and the bank was blocking them because they were trying to buy cryptocurrency. So that's a case where the censorship is bad. It's not protecting you. So this is something that blockchain enables, this censorship resistance. You know that as long as you pay the network fee, your transaction will make it in there and nobody can stop it. So back to disintermediation. Why is this picked up on so much? And my take is that it's the thing that companies get. They understand this. They see it as a property that they can use in order to take on the incumbents. Companies like to find things that allow them to do something cheaper or quicker or more efficiently or to more customer satisfaction that allows them to compete in the market. And so that's why I think this particular topic comes up a lot. But I mean, that's my personal opinion. This is what I see when I talk to companies. They jump in on disintermediation almost immediately, as that's what they think the defining characteristic of blockchain is. So there are some difficulties when it comes to disintermediation. If you are responsible for your own belongings, you have to be responsible, you have to be educated, and you have to understand the implications of that ownership. And I have a couple of examples. I think I'll cut it a bit short, though. One is the example of a guy in England, or in Wales rather, who had mined 10,000 bitcoins, put them on a hard drive, and then 3 or 4 years later forgot about it and threw the hard drive out. And then he discovered a few years later that actually there is now what is worth, well, it's a 9-figure sum in dollars of bitcoins on a hard drive in a rubbish tip outside Swansea. And he's now condemned for the rest of his life to dig through that rubbish tip to try and find that hard drive that he lost. And it's not much of a life, but it's hard to resist when you know that there's a fortune waiting to be found. The other example I have here is of a Bitcoin address that is generated from what is known as a null string. And this is one that bites programmers. If they have a typo in a variable name, then their program could end up creating this address rather than the one they want to send their Bitcoin to. And this address, well, everybody who knows a bit about computer programming knows what its private key is. So this is monitored 24/7. As soon as any Bitcoins go to it, they're immediately drained by somebody. It's received 72 Bitcoins to date due to programmer errors. So that's about $1.5 million at current prices. So again, you have to be careful, and it's hard even for programmers. It's not just people who don't understand technology who have this difficulty. So, and that's just Bitcoin. I mean, Ethereum's worse because you have another layer with smart contracts, which gives you a whole new area of things that can go wrong. Smart contracts that have been written on purpose to deceive you, so they are actually not decentralized. They've been programmed specifically to give control to one particular party to take advantage of you. There are subtle bugs in honest contracts that crop up months or years later. And then there's just what I call here bad tokenomics. People building smart contracts without an understanding of trading, marketplaces, economic rules, and they think they've come up with something clever, and then it turns out a month down the line that actually it's something really, really stupid that we knew about for decades. Right, so it was also about reintermediation, so I need to move on to that. And that's what I'm talking about when we come to the custodial world again, where people have their keys, they own their cryptocurrency or their NFTs or whatever, and then they hand the keys over, or they hand the assets over to another party. And they do this for convenience, in the same way that we put our money in bank accounts for convenience. In Finland, there are areas now where you can't even pay for things with cash anymore. You have to have a bank account. It's actually incredibly inconvenient to use cash. There's efficiency, which is rather than me having to learn how to do it, and you, and you, and you, we get one person. It's the reason why I don't know about the law, because if I need to know some legal issue, I hire a lawyer. I have other things to do with my time, and somebody else has spent their time on that topic. And then there's one particularly to do with marketplaces. That's why I put awareness down there, which is how the exchanges and NFT marketplaces have sprung up. People like to go to a marketplace. This is something that's been going on for centuries, for millennia, in fact. It's good to have a central place that everybody knows is a place that you can go to do something. And then we saw traditional town marketplaces move out of the towns and cities into supermarkets and malls when transportation got better. So reintermediation is a natural state of affairs for human beings. We move things into centralized control for a number of reasons and advantages. In blockchain, I went through, well, I didn't go through some of the things, I'll go through them now. Here's a list of some of the areas where things get centralized. So Nakamoto had this idea that everybody would be running a Bitcoin miner and it would be completely decentralized. It's all conglomerating in mining pools. And there's good economic reasons for that. If I run a miner on my own, I'm never going to find any Bitcoin. If I pool it with other people, it's like a lottery pool. You know, there are some companies that I've worked for where the employees all put a bit of money in to buy lottery tickets, and if it's the big jackpot, they share it amongst each other. I'll speed up a bit in this, but maybe it's worth picking on custodial control by exchanges. So companies like Coinbase and Binance, you hand them your assets, and now they possess them and they control them, and you don't anymore. And so we're back to it being a bit like a bank. There's one big difference, though, which is that this second wave of centralization, the reintermediation, is now built on a different kind of platform to the one that we had before. So whereas before you may build a centralized system that is centralized all the way from the foundations upwards, now you're looking at centralized systems, but they're built on a decentralized foundation. And that's a significant issue because it does mean that you can claim back control, which is something you couldn't do in the previous system. And an example is Windows versus Ubuntu Linux. Ubuntu is issued by Canonical. It's a software company just as Microsoft issues Windows, and Microsoft is a software company. But with Ubuntu, you can, if you really want to and you need to, go in and look at the source code to make a change. On Windows you can't because it's proprietary. So there you have the foundation that is centralized versus the foundation that's decentralized, even if the building on top is centralized. So I was going to give this kind of academic summary and bring in a bit of Hegel and maybe some Popper and some Lakatos too, but I decided to skip that because I don't think it's entirely relevant. And what I'd like to leave you with instead is a couple of questions that you may want to ask yourself. And I can ask these questions because one of the great things that blockchain has done is bring an alternative to the table as an option for us to consider. And as a result, it's making us ask questions that we wouldn't ask before. Kind of the same way that in the Middle Ages, people believed in the divine right of kings, and you just wouldn't question the system. And then over time, the idea of republics took hold again, and we saw changes in the way states were run. So the questions to ask are, when you see a system, maybe it's a legal one, a bureaucratic one, a political one, or even a technical one, you have to ask yourself, am I happy to give over some of my control to this system? And the answer is often yes. But then the second question you have to ask yourself is, am I able to get that control back? And I think that one is the defining question. So, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much.